Hello and welcome back to another draft video. My name is Cecilia and today we're going to be looking at the top 10 defensive tackles of the 2026 draft. Before we get started, you should know a few things about this class. Number one, it's a pretty deep class. I'm not saying it's the same as the 2025 defensive tackle class, but if your team needs a guy will be available somewhere where your team is picking for reasonably good value. You know, the first two I talk about, they're probably out of reach if you're not picking top 15 to top 20, but there are going to be plenty of opportunities for great developmental pieces all the way through the later rounds. The next thing you need to know is that this class favors run stoppers more so than pass rushers, in my opinion. So if you're looking for floor raisers who hold up against double teams and can bring some beef to your defensive line, this is the class for you. But please like and subscribe if you like what you see today. By the way, shout out to my members because they are seeing this video a full week early. A lot's going to change between now and the draft. I'm filming this in December, so keep in mind we haven't seen the playoffs yet. We haven't seen the combine or any of the other opportunities for players to show what they have. So I did just want to mention that so that if you guys want a chance to see these guys in the playoffs, you know, if you see this video early enough, you'll be able to. And if you're here because your team got any of these players, I hope you can find something to be excited about, especially if your team got one of these first two guys. But if you know that your team's going to take a defensive tackle, I would encourage you to watch some of that film now so that you can form your own opinions and get your own sense of how they are as a player. I think it's a lot more exciting to watch the draft when you understand who these players are and you know who your team is getting. So with that being said, let's get into our first prospect, who is, in my opinion, the best defensive tackle of the class. I think he should be a top 10 pick. I know some of you watching this are Chargers fans, so I apologize. He should be well out of the reach of Chargers. It's Peter Woods from Clemson, number 11. He's 6'3", 315 pounds. Like I said, he should be a top 10 pick, and there, in my opinion, isn't a pick in the draft that he isn't worth. He's a 4-time state champion in high school in Alabama. In college, he rushes the quarterback from all over the line. They use him in so many different ways. Tremendous versatility. His strength and speed make him a pretty rare athlete. He's benching 490 pounds while running a 4.86 40-yard dash. That doesn't sound impressive when you're used to hearing like, oh, Xavier Worthy got 4.2. You guys, this is 315 pounds coming at you. So that's tremendous athleticism. He can collapse the pocket with speed to power. He can hand fight. He has a plethora of pass rush moves. He swipes, swims, counters, punches, whatever you want. He's probably got it. There is nothing technically raw about this player, and that's pretty rare for a position that, you know, usually the best athletes aren't playing when they're younger. And what that speaks to is his coachability. Like, you gotta believe for him to be that skilled, not just talented, but technically proficient, you know, you gotta believe that he's really listening to his coaches, he's really watching film and really going out of his way to get better rather than just depending on his natural athleticism. He's excellent at seeing through run blocking schemes. He often powers through double teams, which I think is really important. He never loses gap integrity. He's not a perfect prospect. Don't think that he is. He doesn't do a great job finishing plays. He kind of needs to win right away, or he can't really get reset and make up for it later. He doesn't have as high of a pressure rate or sack rate that you would expect with his size and speed. The production's not really there, but the film looks good. So don't get it twisted. There is no pick in this draft that he isn't worth. If your team gets him, you should be excited because you got a dog. He will likely take a couple years to really come online in the NFL, but he would have a role in any scheme right away. You should be very excited if your team took him. Up next, we have Caleb Banks from Florida, number 88. He's 6'6" and 330 pounds. That's a big guy. Spent 2 years at Louisville where he only got one sack. He transferred to Florida in 2023. Again, only got one sack, but he really broke out against Ole Miss last year. He gave Jackson Dart hell up the middle. He was good enough the rest of the year that he was projected to go reasonably high in the 2025 draft, but he decided to stay for his senior year, and now he's potentially a first-round pick in 2026. Because he stayed, he'll be the first man in his family to graduate college, which is pretty cool. He is very well-spoken, very confident at the podium. He's clearly a leader on the Gators defense. He mentioned focusing on his pad level and his run stopping ability at the beginning of the season. Unfortunately, he broke his foot in September. He did return a few weeks ago, but because of this, there's not a whole lot of 2025 tape on him. I think the tape that we have shows pretty significant improvement. He still does struggle with pad level, but his athleticism alone puts him in the high tier of defensive interior players, and you know, he clearly has self-awareness. He seems very coachable in that regard. If you believe in your NFL team's defensive line coach in terms of development, this should be your guy. This is someone you should be very excited about if he ends up on your team. I think he does a great job reading quarterbacks, stepping up in the pocket, and adjusting to finish the job of edge rushers rather than letting quarterbacks scramble up the middle. He's prevented so many plays from being extended just by being patient, being smart, being relentless, and I think that's something that translates to the NFL really well. He has great speed off the ball considering he's such a big guy. He has some solid pass rush moves, effective swim move stands out, push pulls, two-handed swipes. Right now, I think I would grade him toward the end of the first round, but it wouldn't shock me if a team takes him top 15, and I would be surprised with where the NFL is with him right now if he ends up making it past the top 20. But if he does and your team gets him, you should be very excited. I think the biggest factor is how is the NFL going to feel about the foot injury? I think NFL coaches have a complicated and varying relationship to injuries in prospects. Some of them are like, oh, I don't care. I'll get him for better value. I'll get him on a discount. And then other coaches are like, I'm so sick of seeing my team injured. I'm just going to take the best player available who I know isn't really an injury problem. If it were up to me, I would take him at the very tail end of the first round or the early part of the second round. But I think realistically, there's just too big of a drop off from Peter Woods to the next guy that I think he'll probably be taken sooner than that. All right, next up we have Kaden McDonald from Ohio State. He's number 98, 6'3", 326 pounds, another pretty big guy. He was a 4-star recruit out of Georgia. He played in 7 games as a freshman, but he really became a full-time starter his sophomore year. That was the national championship year for the Buckeyes, and he had a big part of their win against Washington, both in pass rush and in run defense. He is involved in a lot of charity work off the field. He always gets academic honors as a communications major, and as someone who watches all of the weekly press conferences, Ryan Day speaks highly of him really consistently. He talks about how much the defense depends on him playing well. They clearly see him as a leader, hard worker, guy who fires up everyone around him. He actually talked about why he has come alive this year in particular with the local news in Central Ohio.
Just putting the work in the off season, stacking days every day, doing extra cardio, conditioning, changing my diet, being in the film room more, caring more about, my future, and that's been really good for me. Just keep going.
He's a fantastic run defender. He is unmovable. No matter how many blockers you put on him, it seems like it doesn't matter. You can't get him out of a running lane. There is a strong argument that he is the best run defender in the class, which is why his stock has risen so much, especially as Ohio State has played some really tough competition, and we're going to see him in the playoffs, right? They're obviously the defending national champions. They're probably going to make it pretty far. They did lose to Indiana, but we're definitely going to see McDonald have more opportunities to show what he has. He's really smart with gap integrity. He's rarely caught off guard by blockers. He's often double teamed. Like I said, against Indiana in the Big Ten championship, he was absorbing triple team and sometimes still managed to disengage and get a stop at the line. And if you know anything about Indiana's offensive line, you know how impressive that is. He only had 13 pressures in the last 2 seasons. He could get more in the postseason. We'll see. McDonald is lacking in pass rush moves to a certain extent. He kind of depends on his strength to get after the quarterback rather than any sort of technical prowess. He doesn't have the twitchiness for speed to power. His get off, it's not the best, and he doesn't show a whole lot with his hands. He does make it hard to escape the pocket because he's really good at disengaging with blockers and closing lanes for quarterbacks to escape in, so he often finishes the job of his teammates. But if you're looking for a stout nose tackle who can be a brick wall from day one for your NFL team, this is your guy. He instantly improves a run defense. I think with what he's good at, he is remarkably consistent, and I personally have him as a late first rounder to mid second rounder. I think he makes a big impact on 3rd and short and goal line situations. And so many teams have realized that they are just too small up the middle. And especially with how many great running backs there are right now, I think more and more teams are going to be looking for those true run stuffers. And in my opinion, he is probably the best run stuffer in this class. Moving on to Kristen Miller out of Georgia. He's number 52, 6'4", 310 pounds, former 4-star recruit, 2-time state champion in high school in Georgia. He broke out in 2024 with 27 tackles on the season. He had a great game against Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl that year. He did have to get a shoulder surgery in that offseason, and he had a leg injury this recent October. There could be a concern there about injury history, and I think without the injury history, maybe he jumps Kaden McDonald's spot as the next guy in this class, but injury history matters. This is someone who has improved significantly since becoming a starter, which is really important to see. He's versatile enough to play any technique along the interior. I think what stands out the most is his effort. He plays hard through every quarter, through every down. He's often the one chasing down quarterbacks on extended plays, which, that's usually more of an edge rusher quality, right? The bigger guys up the middle usually don't do that because they don't feel like they're actually going to be able to chase him down. But sometimes quarterbacks have to cut back, and that extra effort really pays off. He's really twitchy for a tackle, really good first step. He's hard for pass blockers to stop when he isn't forced to stay helmet to helmet with them. If he can force his way into one side or the other, he's really hard for them to slow down. Great lateral quickness to get through the backfield. And he's shown a lot of improvement in the run game too, especially with disengaging when he doesn't win the rep right away so that he can break off and make a tackle in his gap, keep runs relatively short. He plays really smart. He is almost never tricked by blocking schemes as to where the ball is headed. He doesn't really miss tackles. If he touches a runner, that runner's going down. And that is important because that translates to the NFL pretty well, where you're going against bigger guys with better contact balance, more experience. I think a team that feels like they need a high floor in the run game and they can develop pass rush from the ground up would be the most interested in Kristen Miller. It would probably take him a couple years to be more than a rotational piece because of that pass rush deficiency, but it's possible that teams will feel like that has more to do with how Georgia uses him than his actual abilities, and they might take him as early as the first round. I've seen some mock drafts where they're taking him toward the end of the first. I think personally I would put him in the middle of the second round, but, I don't want to put a ceiling on what a team might see in him because he is just that good at stopping the run and his motor is so high. The effort is tremendous, and Georgia's been a really good program for the trenches. All right, next up we have a prospect that I've gotten a lot of questions about because I think people are really excited about his ceiling. It's Amari Washington out of Oregon. He's 6'3", 330 pounds. He was a 4-star recruit out of Arizona. He is a redshirt sophomore, so the tape is kind of limited. There's not a whole lot out there for him. His first time starting is this year. You could definitely expect some time needed to develop. He does not have to declare for this draft, but I think his stock is high enough that financially you kind of have to declare. He played behind Derek Harmon and Jamari Caldwell. He's very fast for his size. He looks like he was built in a lab to be a nose tackle. In 2024, he became a rotational piece for the Ducks. He got 14 pressures. I think his tape against Ohio State that year was especially impressive. Great penetration against Wisconsin for the run stops, and he shows regularly that he can shoot gaps at an elite level. He can crush a pocket, shoot a gap, win with quickness and leverage before linemen can anchor and react. And I talk a lot about technical proficiency. Pad level is probably the most important there because that's something that they are being taught, as early as early high school, right? And so it's kind of like, well, you should have gotten that down by college, and especially, 6'3", if you're any taller than 6 feet, it becomes especially important that you understand leverage, and he definitely does. He demonstrated his bull rush successfully against a strong Indiana offensive line this year. He's definitely improved through 2025, and that trajectory I think is better than the stats show. He's great at disengaging to address plays not in his direction. He's such an important part of that Oregon defense. Now, not a perfect prospect. His production isn't consistent. He doesn't have much in the way of pass rush moves. Occasionally he'll show quickness cutting across linemen, and he looks good with his hands, but there's no consistency to suggest that that is a core part of his game or something that he is really focused on. So you'd probably have to be working with him from the ground up in that sense. He definitely needs discipline through fatigue. He loses leverage advantages at times in the fourth quarter, which isn't great. He misses tackles just under 20% of the time, and that is too high for a nose tackle. That absolutely has to be improved. This could be due to his shorter arms. At least it looks like shorter arms on tape. We'll obviously get all the stats at the combine. It can make wrapping your arms around a runner a little bit harder. So these all feel like things that can be developed at the NFL. He can become a better tackler. He can be taught pass rush moves, but I do think it would take time for him to become a starter who can play in most situations. To me, this is a rotational player who should play more in run stopping situations than pass rush situations. And even then, he cannot be the focal point of the run stopping efforts. A team may want to bet on his traits though, because the traits are excellent. They may want to take him in, the earlier half of the second round. To me, me, this is a late second round player, but there's a lot to be excited about there. He was a very important part of the Oregon defense, and Oregon's been a really successful program in the trenches. So if your team picked him, there's a lot to be excited about. All right, next we're going to move on to the more developmental players. I think the players that I just talked about, on the right team, they could be starters right away. Even Amari Washington, I think there are going to be some teams that can find a starting role for him. The rest of these players I see more as developmental. Maybe they become full-time starters at the end of their rookie year, but they're not going to be necessarily plug and play unless a team is really deficient in that position group. I'm going to go through them in the order that I think they should be taken, but like I said, a lot will change between now and the combine, now and the draft. So keep that in mind. Next up in this group, we have Dontay Corleone from Cincinnati, the Godfather. He's number 2, 6'1", 335 pounds. He was a 3-star recruit out of Ohio, first team All-State. He redshirted his freshman year, and then he started his second year in 2021. He got freshman All-American honors. He is an athletic freak. His first step is so quick. He gets great penetration. Even against double teams, his penetration is solid. He often has to handle triple teams just because that's how important he's been. He has a great bull rush and often has a leverage advantage against the taller interior linemen. You could really see that against Nebraska this year. He's only 6'1", but he is a huge guy. He is usually visibly larger than the guards and centers he goes up against, and some teams are going to find that very exciting. This is someone who teams might overdraft just because those traits they feel like can't be passed up on. And I would see their point. He can shed blocks really well with his hands. He punches or shoves guys out of his way, and at times he makes these giant men in front of him look tiny. He has a decent swim move. He likes to hand fight. I think at his size, he might struggle to be an every down player in the NFL just because of the conditioning necessities that come with that. He definitely is a player that wants to be a true nose tackle. I think he struggles the farther he gets from lining up against the center. So he doesn't have that versatility that some teams are going to value. He improved a lot over the course of his college career, which scouts will really like. He's clearly a hard worker. I think of all the developmental prospects I'm going over, this is the one I feel the best about in terms of the floor that he offers as a run stopper. It's not like he offers nothing in the pass rush. He has some real technical ability. He makes a deliberate effort to win with his hands. So clearly he's been coached and has listened in that regard. I think that shows that any possible way he can take to improve, he'll take it, and it doesn't just depend on his remarkable strength. So I think a lot of defensive line coaches would be salivating at the traits they see in this guy. So I am higher on him than the consensus seems to be. I would put him in the mid to high 3rd round range. Ultimately, I think he'll be taken even higher than that because I think the NFL bets on traits more than the media world of scouting does. But wherever your team took him, I expect him to be a big contributor even in his rookie year in certain situations. So a lot to be excited about there. Next player I want to talk about is Zane Durant from Penn State. This is number 28, 6'1", 294 pounds. You'll notice he's on the smaller side for a defensive tackle. He's more of a 3-tech than a nose tackle. Penn State typically favors an even front, so that made sense for them. But if you know anything about Penn State this year, you know that they had a really rough year. Almost every player regressed. You know, they fired James Franklin after losing to Northwestern and UCLA. But Zane Durant, he still got 25 tackles and 4 sacks. He got more sacks than he did in 2024, but he came nowhere close to the 42 tackles he got that year. Just know that everyone around him also took a step back that year. And I think on defense, that matters even more. You know, you could still, as an individual offensive lineman, as a left tackle, you can still perform really well, even if the guard next to you doesn't do very well. That's not really the case for a defensive tackle because they can kind of just put all their resources toward you and that's it. And if your teammates don't do anything with their matchups that now they have an advantage on, kind of doesn't matter. And I think that was an issue that Zane Durant had to deal with at Penn State. But getting into who he is, he was a 4-star recruit out of Florida. He made an instant impact his rookie year, despite not starting every game. Every year with that team, he had a bigger and bigger role. I think 2024 is really his breakout year. He probably could have declared last year, in fact, and he would have been drafted. But after returning to Penn State, I think he continued to improve and show what kind of athlete he is, because that's really his strength. For whatever reason, every year he seems to play his best against Northwestern. Sorry to my fellow Chicagoans, but he got 8 tackles and a sack against them this year, despite the really close loss. I also thought he looked good against Oregon. If you watched my centers or guards video, you'll know how good they are in the trenches, and they frequently double teamed him and still got moved by him, which is really important because, as a smaller prospect, you wonder, how is he going to handle the big bodies of the NFL? And, you kind of look at that game and go, okay, there is a world in which it doesn't matter that he's smaller and he can handle it. He had a rep in the third quarter where he pushes Poncho, the Oregon center, back like 5 yards. And there's like a 35-pound weight discrepancy there. Like that's no easy feat. And I like Poncho. I think he's a really good pass protector. Zane Durant is really fast, really athletic, a fantastic first step. Probably the best first step in the class. He's really good bend. Like you watch him play and you're like, oh, he could be an edge rusher, which is really rare, especially in this class. Really strong legs despite a smaller frame. He can anchor well for his size in the run game. Like I said, he performs stronger than his height and weight suggest that he should. He struggles at times against players with longer arms. I think we saw that in the Indiana game against Pat Coogan, who is a really good center. And I didn't mention him in my centers video, but had I done a top 10 centers list, he might have been on that, especially as he's improved throughout the season. So I do think that is something that's going to make teams nervous and make teams feel like he can be a complementary piece, but he can't be drafted as like the main piece for the defensive line. He can also get overwhelmed in the run game by the really big, strong guards, but he fights hard. Sometimes he can get them off balance with a swipe or cross chop. So it's not like he has nothing in those situations, but more than anything, the effort is incredible. He chases down quarterbacks and passes to the flats and screens relentlessly, and his speed allows him to prevent any cutbacks, and I'm not aware of him dropping into coverage, but I look at this guy and I'm like, oh, he 100% has the balance and ability to flip the hips to do that. He's fast enough. He's athletic enough. This is not someone who has to just put on a bunch of weight and be a nose tackle. This is someone that a more versatile defense could find a really interesting role for him. I don't have an issue with his size. A lot of people are. If you're looking for a run-stuffing defensive tackle, yeah, it's not him. But I think his lack of length is more of a problem than his size in general. He's not the best at adjusting to runs after shooting the gap. I think sometimes he lets himself get too far into the backfield, and then he kind of takes himself out of the play by losing gap discipline. Very much an all-or-nothing player in the run game. Because he's smaller, like I said, run game is going to have a much lower floor. I think teams are going to be wary of taking him before round 3, especially after a bit of a regression last year. He has a lot of technical refinement to do, but to me, he has a high ceiling. He's incredibly athletic. He was getting first round buzz after 2024. And, I think ultimately he would have been taken in the late second round, but I think some teams will blame his regression on being on a team that fell apart, that had their coach fired, that were in a really tumultuous situation. So everything around him regressed as well. For me, this is a third rounder who will take a lot of time, a lot of coaching to come online, but has an immensely high ceiling. And the thing that makes him intriguing to me is I think there is a strong chance that he is actually available later in the third round or even into the fourth round. So I think some team out there might get a real steal in Zane Durant. And as a Chargers fan, I absolutely love the idea of Jesse Miller with a player like this. He loves dropping defensive tackles into coverage or edge rushers into coverage. He loves simulated pressures and anything he can do to make a quarterback not know where the throwing lanes are going to be. Zane Durant would be excellent for that. All right, moving on to a much larger player, Darrell Jackson Jr., number 6 for Florida State University. He's 6'5", 337 pounds. He played at Maryland in 2021 as a true freshman. He wasn't a starter, but he was a rotational player in pretty much every game. In 2022, he played for Miami, and when he transferred to Florida State University in 2023, he wasn't able to play much because of eligibility issues with the NCAA. He only played in the Orange Bowl that year, I believe. But in 2024, you saw him come alive. 32 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, a pass breakup. He also got a forced fumble in there. He played one of his best games against Miami, his former school, and he got 2 sacks and a fumble. And I've talked in my other videos, when you evaluate prospects, you want to see how they play in big games. How players play against their former schools matters. A lot of players, especially because they're younger, they take that very personally if they didn't get the role that they wanted at that school. So I think it's a good sign that he played well against Miami. He definitely improved as a pass rusher. that year, and he showed he can really collapse the pocket. He actually initially declared for the draft in 2024, and then he withdrew his name because he felt like he had more to give FSU. In interviews, he seems really passionate about that. This is someone who's clearly a leader on the defense. He talks a lot about accountability, listening to his teammates' insights, being humble, trying to figure out how they can play better as individuals and a unit. He's been pretty up and down this year. He got pancaked really bad against Florida. They were getting every pin block that they wanted on him, but he had some great reps against Miami. He took on double teams and he still got pressures. Overall, I think 2025 has really been his best year, which is a good sign, but his pass rush win rate is only 5%. He's at his best when he gets to bull rush centers or use his exceptional length to stop running backs from escaping in the A or B gaps. And this isn't someone who misses tackles, and I think that increases his potential if other aspects of his game improve, because if he can get to where, if he can hit his marks, he's not going to miss. And he has great disengage because of that strength, plenty of burst, plenty of power. He's just lacking in that hand technique, which to me suggests that he depends on his size a little bit more than you would like. He loses leverage just often enough that, I just don't think his size is entirely an advantage for him without a lot of technical refinement. So ultimately, it's a developmental player with a high ceiling. I think he has starting upside on the right team with some time. And to me, this is a late third-round player. But it wouldn't shock me a bit if he slides a little bit later than that, just because of how behind he is from a technical standpoint. Still a lot to be excited about with him. Next up, we have CJ Fite, the Arizona State defensive tackle. He's number 99, 6'2", 305 pounds. In high school in Texas, he was a 3-star recruit. He competed in throwing events in track and field, which I think is really interesting. He has incredibly strong arms, so I think it makes sense. As a freshman, he made an immediate impact as a starter. He got the 5th best run defense grade of all freshmen, and he seems like a really mature person with his priorities straight.
So this the first one says, what would Nate say? Just like going about every day in life. That's just as you make decisions, what would she say about him? Because we look to her for a lot of things. We used to look for a lot of things. And she gave us a lot of knowledge, a lot of spoke to us with a lot of wisdom. So just having that person to look to and just think about and have in the back of your mind when you're making certain decisions. And then I have another one that says, get all you can while you can. You get a lot of opportunities in life, and if you waste them, they're gone. So it's just making sure you take advantage of those opportunities, because they're not always going to be there, and they won't always come back. They won't always present themselves. So as you're here on this earth, making sure you do all you can while you can.
He's someone who sets the standards for new players around him. He was voted a member of the Pat Tillman Leadership Council for multiple seasons. That's essentially that school's equivalent of captains. He's a junior. He doesn't have to declare, and I think there's a chance he goes back to school and tries to improve his stock. But if he does declare, there's a lot to be excited about. He often does the dirty work on the team. He absorbs double teams and still at times is able to move that line of scrimmage forward. Pad level can be a little high at times. Sometimes he loses the hand fight against the more technically refined guards and centers, but he still has fast, powerful hands that coaches can be excited about with development. He got pushed around in the run game a bit against Utah. They have some of the bigger offensive linemen in college, but he has really good lateral moving speed. He has even been dropped into coverage a few times, which is cool. He doesn't offer much outside of power in terms of pass rush. He really depends on winning right away. Even in the run game, he struggles to disengage when he gets locked up. There's no question about his dedication, coachability, preparation, or any of the intangibles, so I think a lot of coaches will be willing to take a chance on him. And I think he is best fit with a team that wants a true nose tackle, a 3-4 front so that he can take on centers who are often a little bit smaller than guards. He's not the most athletic, but he has the strength needed to perform at the NFL, and at the right place, he should be a long-term starter. So for me, this is a end of the 3rd round or early in the 4th round kind of player. All right, next up we have a player I've gotten a lot of questions about, a lot of people are excited about, Dominique Orange, or Big Citrus from Iowa State, number 95, 6'1", 335 pounds. He's a huge man. 2025 was his 5th year with Iowa State. He was a 3-time all-conference selection, including first-team selection in the Big 12 in 2024. In 2023, he got 39 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks. And then in the 2024 offseason, he had to deal with blood clots, and he couldn't really put in any work for 3 months. He missed the first game of that season. He still performed as well as almost anyone in the defensive tackle category in the run game. He had some really awesome goal line stops, and he could have declared and been drafted last year. It's hard for running backs to run by his gap because he can tackle them with just one arm because of how strong he is. He can bench 450 pounds. He can squat 650 pounds, which is insane, and it very much translates to his tackling ability. You just can't get by him. He does at times struggle to disengage. You could see that against TCU at the goal line. He lets a touchdown be scored in his lane because he couldn't free his arm. He was just too slow with his hands. But if he can improve that, he would be incredibly effective because of his strength. He can usually anchor really well, even against double teams. In 2025, he hasn't been as productive on paper, so the consistent growth hasn't really been there. He's still an athletic freak. He moves really fast. He's really strong. A lot of teams are going to be really excited about those traits. And he's had some really game-changing moments for his team. He got some tackles by being persistent in going after the ball carrier and taking them down when teammates slowed them. I think he's taken a big step forward in the last few weeks of the season. He gets off the snap really quickly. It can give him leverage advantages. He has a great first step. He beats blockers to the gap and gets pressures. You definitely saw that against Arizona State in the Big 12 championship in 2024. He wins by staying low, getting blockers off balance, which you can also see in that Arizona State game when he gets a sack right at the end of the second quarter. He has some really impressive moments. When he doesn't win right away, he does kind of look a little bit lost. So I think better linemen can block him for a long time without being pushed back. He just kind of gives up and tries to bat the ball instead of getting after the quarterback, or at least pushing forward and closing the pocket. He has limited pass rush moves. He kind of only has a swim move. This is someone I think a very patient team needs to draft. He will need to improve his stamina. He needs to become more proficient with pass rush moves. But I think he can have an impact on the run game really quickly, and he is an incredible canvas for some great defensive line coach to work with. He has so much raw strength. There may be health concerns because of the blood clots and because of the amount of weight he's carrying. Obviously, the medical exam should give teams some insight into that, but to me, I see him as a fourth-round prospect with high-end upside after a couple years of development. I really don't think he should be taken ahead of the fourth round unless a team really feels like they have a long time to wait for his development and just wants to bet on traits. I know that the consensus is just a little bit higher than that. People are really excited about him. This is how I see him right now. I'm curious how he'll perform at the combine. Curious if he wants to go into the NFL at a lighter weight, what kind of athlete he wants to be up there, but there's a lot to be excited about if he's on your team. The last player I want to mention, Skylar Gill Howard, or Jill Howard, I don't know how you say that. He could end up breaking into this top 10 list. He could be a combine breakout player. I could see that happening. He plays for Texas Tech, which has a great defensive line, but he actually started his career as a D2 player, and then he was a walk-on at NIU. He was a linebacker originally, and NIU asked him to put on a bunch of weight and be a defensive tackle. He put on like 45 pounds to play defensive tackle for him, and now he's at Texas Tech and looks really good. So I could see him kind of rising in these ranks. It's certainly a great story. That would be really cool. And he was a linebacker. He has the athleticism. So I think that would be cool if he can break into the top 10. But that to me are the top 10 defensive tackles in this class. Let me know what position you want me to cover next. Obviously, as a Chargers fan, I'm looking for a blocking tight end. I'm looking for a run-stopping linebacker. I'm looking at a swing tackle. And obviously, I already covered guards and centers, so you can look at those videos if you're interested. But please like and subscribe if you've liked what you've seen today. Members will see this video a full week early. Let me know what your top 10 list is. Who are you the most excited about? And who do you think would be a good fit with your team in particular? Thank you so much for being here. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.